Robert John Downey Jr. was born in Manhattan, New York on April 4th, 1965, to parents Robert John Downey Sr. and mother Elsie Ann Ford. His parents were both born in the 30s. Robert Sr. was born in New York City, and Elsie was born in small-town Pennsylvania. His father, Robert Sr., was a well-known actor, director, producer, writer, and cinematographer, and less favorably, a heavy drug user. He had made his mark by creating low-budget, independent films, aligning with the absurdist movement and anti-establishment/nonconformity throughout the 60s and the 70s. Most notably was his underground film Putney Swope, a satire on the advertising world and the portrayal of race in Hollywood, released in 1969.
I'd like the way you handle yourself on the telephone. You're nobody's fool, except perhaps mine. But I'm glad I chose you for this job. You have justified my faith in you.
His mother Elsie was an accomplished actress/screenwriter and a struggling alcoholic. Known initially for her roles in Babbo 73, released in 1964, which was considered an ultra-low-budget comedy experiment, written and directed by Robert Sr. Elsie played a hitchhiker. As well as Chafed Elbows, a manic comedy, again written and directed by Robert Sr., released in 1966, where Elsie played all 13 female parts. Robert Jr. has one sibling, an older sister, Allison Lee Downey, born November 29, 1963. She initially attempted to follow in her mother's footsteps as an actress and writer. She has made attempts as a musician, songwriter, and model. Allison founded and runs a successful business currently that makes it easy to find the best baby and kid products called Wee Springs. Allison had also struggled with bulimia and drug addiction in the past. In 1970, when Robert Jr. was 5, he debuted as a child actor in his father's film Pound. This movie was based on a Broadway play written by Downey Sr. in 1961. The movie was made from the perspective of dogs in a pound, but played by human characters. The movie was very strange, and puts you on the edge of discomfort. Robert Jr.'s very, very first line in a movie was, "Have any hair on your balls?"
The next morning we go upstairs, there's no more furniture, the roof's gone, and so's my hair. That tornado scared me so much it made my hair disappear.
Have any hair on your balls?
I'm afraid to look.
In 1971, when Robert Jr. was only 6 years old, his father first introduced him to drugs. The two smoking marijuana together was the beginning of a long and lonesome road of addiction and alcoholism for Robert Jr. Robert Sr. now admits to regretting this decision. Robert Sr. was quoted in Newsweek saying, "We thought it was cute to let them smoke it and all. It was an idiot move on our parts." In July of 1972, Robert Jr. appeared in Greaser's Palace, another film directed by his father, in which he played a Quasimodo-like child. He was joined this time not only by his mother, but his sister Allison and cousin Stacy Sheehan as well. The film followed a Christ-like figure on the way to Jerusalem to find work as a performer. In January 1975, Robert Jr., now 9 years old, appeared as himself in a moment-to-moment remake retitled 2 Tons of Turquoise to Teos Tonight, another directorial venture by Robert Sr., with screenwriting contributions by wife Elsie. This was a comedy film that literally leaps from moment to moment and makes very little to no sense. His mother starred in the film, where at one moment she's an accomplished dancer and the next a coke fiend. Later this year, after Robert Jr. had turned 10, the family spent about a year living in London, England. Robert Jr. was sent to the Perry House School in Chelsea to study ballet. By 1976, the Downeys had moved back to New York, where both Robert Jr. and his sister Allison were enrolled in Stage Door Manor, a performing arts center in upstate New York. It was at Stage Door that Robert Jr. had his live performance debut as Mr. Dussel in the stage production of The Diary of Anne Frank. In 1978, when Robert Jr. was 13 years old, his parents separated, largely due to the fallout of Robert Sr.'s excessive drug use. Robert Jr. chose to move with his father to L.A., where he attended Santa Monica High School. Among his school friends were Sean Penn, Rob Lowe, Charlie Sheen, and Emilio Estevez. In June of 1980, when Robert Jr. was 15 years old, he appeared as a soccer player in the Mad magazine presentation and coming-of-age teen comedy, Up the Academy. Again directed by Rob Sr., the film follows 4 teens sent to boarding school who choose to rebel. Up until this point, Robert Sr. was sort of taking advantage of the free labor employed by his son, and failed to give Robert Jr. any credit for any of his movie appearances thus far. Of course, Robert Jr. saw this as more time to be able to spend with his dad, but the reality of it is somewhat disappointing. Throughout this time, Robert Jr. admits there was a lot of pot and coke around. He also details how doing drugs with his father developed a kind of emotional bond between them. It became a way that Robert Jr. could relate and feel more included in his father's world. In 1982, Robert Jr., now 17, chose to drop out of high school and move back to New York to live with his mother and pursue acting full-time. When he first arrived in New York, he'd gotten himself multiple part-time jobs bussing tables at Central Falls Restaurant, working in a shoe store, as well as performing as living art in Soho. In 1983, he partook in a short-lived musical production entitled American Passion, presented by the Joyce Theater in the Chelsea neighborhood of New York City. A turning point in his acting career came in March of 1983, where he played the supporting role of Stuart in the romantic comedy film Baby It's You. This was his first appearance in a film not directed by his father. He was cast alongside Rosanna Arquette and Vincent Spano. Released in October of 1984, Robert Jr. appeared in the drama thriller Firstborn, alongside Peter Weller and Sarah Jessica Parker. Downey played Lee, a supporting character in the film. This also happens to be the then 10-year-old Corey Haim's film debut, where he played a boy whose mother is in an abusive relationship. Robert met longtime girlfriend Sarah Jessica Parker on set. They moved in together only 8 weeks after they began dating. The two playfully reminisce, saying they would throw water balloons at their neighbors, who would retaliate with a garden hose. Robert thrived on Sarah's normalcy, because it balanced out his eccentric behavior. They professed having a very conservative relationship because of their opposite personalities. In the early stages of Robert and Sarah's relationship, they had a young Corey Haim come to live with them. Haim recalls, "I was 10, and I'll never forget. We went to like a crew party, and my mom and dad were like dancing with other people, and it was rocky. And I just started crying. Whatever. And I remember Sarah pulling me outside with Robert. And Robert said, 'You're coming to live with me.' And the next thing I remember, I was in their car, and we were walking. We went back to their place, and in their bedroom upstairs in this New York loft, they cleaned everything out and put a blue light bulb in there for me, and a mattress and everything. And I lived there for a month and a half, maybe 2 months, with him and Sarah." The circumstances are unclear as to why he moved out of Robert and Sarah's, but it can be assumed he went back to live with his mother. Corey Haim suffered greatly within the industry, between alleged sexual abuse and the dependency and later abuse of prescription medication. There's more detail regarding Corey in the Winona Ryder video, and I will be going deeper into child abuse in Hollywood, as well as the many young stars who have suffered through it. By the time you see this, it might already be available. If not, stay tuned. In January 1985, Robert Jr. had his acting breakthrough with a supporting role as Jimmy Parker in the drama film Tough Turf. He played the sidekick of Morgan Hiller, played by James Spader, a troubled teenager who relocated to LA from Connecticut. Early 1985, Robert Jr. began appearing on Saturday Night Live as various characters until 1986. He appeared in a total of 16 episodes. Rollingstone magazine later named Downey the worst cast member in its entire run. April 1985, Robert made a cameo in the romantic comedy dance film Girls Just Want to Have Fun as a punk party crasher. Starring in this film was his then-girlfriend Sarah Jessica Parker as Janie Glenn, and other appearances included Shannon Doherty, Helen Hunt, and Hank Azaria. Cyndi Lauper herself made a brief special appearance as a woman in the diner. Robert kept himself busy, and the teen sci-fi Weird Science was released in August of 1985. Robert was cast as one of the teenagers who humiliates the lead characters for longing after their girlfriends. This was Robert's very first film under Silver Pictures with producer Joel Silver. In the June 1986 comedy Back to School, written by and starring Rodney Dangerfield, Robert Jr. had a small part as Derek Lutz, the roommate of Chaz, played by William Zabka. Throughout 1986, he was considered for various roles, such as that of Billy the Kid, given to Rob Lowe, Tom Cruise's roles in the films Legend and Top Gun, the role of Ducky in the John Hughes film Pretty in Pink, which went to John Cryer, as well as the lead role in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which was given to Matthew Broderick. September of 1987, he landed his very first starring role in a romantic comedy written and directed by James Toback called The Pickup Artist. Robert was cast as Jack Jericho, a womanizer who redeems himself by helping Randy Jensen, played by Molly Ringwald, rescue her father from the mob. Toback says of Downey getting the part, "He walked into my office, and literally a minute after we started talking, I said, 'By the way, would you like to play the lead in this movie?' And he said, 'Sure.' It was immediate. It was chemical. It was indisputable." November of 1987, in the drama film Less Than Zero, loosely based on the Bret Easton Ellis novel of the same name, Robert had a co-starring role as Julian Wells. Alongside Jamie Gertz as Blair, the pair starred as a young drug-addicted couple. Laurie Rodkin, Robert's former manager, lied to directors and producers about him being clean. Robert says of his drug use during the film, "Until that movie, I took my drugs after work and on weekends. Maybe I'd turn up hungover on the set, but no more so than the stuntman. That changed on Less Than Zero. I was playing this junkie, and for me, the role was like the ghost of Christmas Future. The character was an exaggeration of myself. Then things changed, and in some ways, I became an exaggeration of the character. That lasted far longer than it needed to last." Realizing his habit was escalating, Rodkin begged him to go to rehab. He was admitted to the rehab center Sierra Tucson in Arizona to get his cocaine habit under control. When he was released, he fired his manager. Laurie claims that being fired was worth it. She was quoted saying, "Every day I look in the newspaper and I think I'm going to read Robert's obituary." Downey appeared in the teen comedy Johnny Be Good in March of 1988, co-starring Anthony Michael Hall, alongside Uma Thurman and Paul Gleason. The film follows a group of high school students, mainly Hall as Johnny Walker, and his best friend Leo Wiggins, played by Robert Jr. Johnny is a quarterback being shopped by colleges, who reaps the benefits with help of friend Leo. When the MeToo movement came to fruition, Uma Thurman openly stated that she was sexually assaulted by a man 20 years her senior when she was only 16 years old. She had had only 2 roles by the time she was 16, Johnny Be Good and Kiss Daddy Goodnight. After further investigation, it had most likely happened on the set of Johnny Be Good. There was only one person that fit, and he happened to be exactly 20 years her senior at that time. Steve James, who played Coach Sanders in the film. She likely saw no use in pursuing it further after stating this during the movement, as he had passed away due to pancreatic cancer in 1993. In the comedy satire Rented Lips, released in July of 1988, directed by his father, Robert Jr. obliged in the starring role of Wolf Dangler, this time with credit. It was about a documentary filmmaker who is given the chance to shoot the musical of his dreams, so long as he completes the shooting of an adult film financed by a church and using the same cast and crew for both films. The drama 1969, written and directed by Ernest Thompson, was released in November of 1988. Robert starred alongside Kiefer Sutherland as Scott Denny and Winona Ryder as Beth Carr, Scott's girlfriend. Downey was cast as Ralph Carr, Beth's brother. The movie was set during the Vietnam War and examined the social tension during that time. Kiefer began living with Downey and Parker off and on while filming 1969. During this time, Robert and Sarah had been having some trouble, and Kiefer stepped in to help mediate the situation. He was probably staying with us for a while, and then I was having some trouble with Sarah Jessica, and he was looking after her. It was all rather incestuous back then. It's more that thing, like, you're all close friends, and he was probably consoling her a bit. Robert Jr. says, "He didn't steal my girl. He remained in the relationship he was in. He was just a shoulder to cry on. Better him than some stranger. Shown in January of 1989 at the United States Film Festival, Robert participated in the mockumentary That's Adequate, about a fictional Hollywood studio. The film featured Jerry and his son Ben Stiller, as well as Bruce Willis. In February of 1989, Robert starred in the courtroom drama True Believer as Roger Barron, a young law graduate who investigates the corruption among the legal officials surrounding the case of a wrongfully accused gang murder. He was cast alongside James Woods. Robert co-starred with Sybil Shepherd in the romantic comedy Chances Are, released in March of 1989. He plays the reincarnated husband of Corinne Jeffries, played by Sybil, named Alex Finch. In August of 1990, Downey accompanied Mel Gibson in the action comedy Air America. They were cast as pilots during the Vietnam War. The movie was based on the true story of how the CIA financed the transport of weapons and illicit substances during that time. While Robert's mother Elsie was trying to achieve sobriety in mid-1990, his own struggle with substance abuse was at an all-time high. Race Newman, author of the 1994 tell-all memoir The Hollywood Connection, recalls a wild night out with Downey in 1991. "I had a gun, freebase cocaine, powder cocaine, ecstasy," says Newman. "I'm holding the wheel, going 100 miles per hour, high as a kite, and he's taking a hit off a cocaine pipe." Later that year, Sarah Jessica had finally had enough of Robert's alcohol and substance abuse, and called it quits. "I like to drink, and I had a drug problem, and that didn't jive with Sarah Jessica, because it's the furthest thing from what she is. She provided me a home and understanding. She tried to help me. She was so miffed when I didn't get my act together. I was in love with Sarah Jessica, but clearly love was not enough." The two parted ways amicably, and Parker referred to the relationship as,
"It was a really adventurous, important 8 years of my life. We were together for a long time, and he's the first person that I lived with, and his career was really just beginning, and I was so proud to see his success and watch him grow professionally. But also, it's no secret that he was struggling, and I had not ever been exposed to that, so I didn't feel particularly equipped. I had to learn how to be with somebody who was, dealing with addiction. So I think those were really important years. There's a lot of good memories, but there's also a lot of learned time spent learning about how we survive, and at what point, do you stop taking care of somebody? Those are pretty big lessons.
Robert had starred once again in another directorial venture of his father's, released in January of 1991, entitled Too Much Son, about a multimillionaire father whose children are both homosexual, and while making out his will, decides to leave his fortune to whomever produces a grandchild first. In May of 1991, Downey starred alongside Sally Field, Kevin Kline, Whoopi Goldberg, and Elizabeth Shue in the comedy Soap Dish that chronicles the backstage story of the cast and crew of a popular soap opera. In May of 1992, Robert married Deborah Lynn Falconer after only dating for 42 days. The two met on the set of the film Shortcuts, which premiered in 1993. They bought a house together in Malibu beside Eddie Van Halen. The two were often at loft parties in Culver City, where Deborah was meeting many other up-and-coming actors, as well as many notable musicians at the time. In the early stages of their relationship, the two shared their love of partying and drugs. In December of 1992, Robert was joined by an extensive cast in tribute of Charles Chaplin, in an adaptation of his autobiography titled simply Chaplin. While Downey had the role of Charlie, the cast included stars like Dan Aykroyd, Anthony Hopkins, Mia Jovovich, Kevin Kline, Marissa Tomei, and James Woods. It also features Geraldine Chaplin in the role of her paternal grandmother. In order to prepare for this film, Robert learned to play the violin and how to play tennis left-handed. He also hired a personal coach to help him imitate Chaplin's posture and how he carried himself. He even sung the song Smile for the soundtrack. He was awarded a BAFTA for Best Actor. August of 1993, Robert was cast as the leading role in the fantasy comedy drama Heart and Souls. He was cast as Thomas Riley, a businessman employed by four spirits to help them with unfinished business, joined once again by Elizabeth Shue, as well as Tom Sizemore. For this film, he took home a Saturn Award for Best Actor. Also released in August of 1993, Robert wrote and starred in the documentary The Last Party, which surrounded the presidential campaign of 1992. On September 7th, 1993, Robert's first child was born, a son named Indio. Robert was still using drugs and alcohol regularly, while then-wife Deborah had kicked her habit before Indio was born. While his parents were ecstatic about his arrival in the world, Indio was born into a strained marriage because of his father's substance abuse and his mother's newfound sobriety. Robert was always a very doting father, but his addiction sometimes got in the way. A gift shop owner recalls seeing Robert with baby Indio. One day, Robert came in with his son. 3 things became immediately clear. He loved his son more than anything in the world. He was high, and he was really nice. He sort of drifted around the shop, picking up the most random purchases, which me and my assistant just kept throwing into bags while watching his son carefully to be sure he didn't bump into anything or drop them, which he didn't. About 40 minutes later, with about $1,000 worth of stuff, we handed him the bags and he left. It was only about 10 minutes later we both realized that neither of us had charged him for anything. To be honest, I don't think he realized either. I think he was just so high it all sort of went over his head. The comedy drama that had led Downey to then-wife Deborah Falconer, Shortcuts, was released in October of 1993, in which Robert was joined once again by an ensemble cast. The film follows the death and infidelity that plagues the lives of 22 characters. Other notable actors and actresses were Andie MacDowell, Julianne Moore, Chris Penn, and Lily Tomlin. The film won a Golden Globe for Best Cast. Released in May of 1994, Robert took part in Anthony Michael Hall's directorial debut, a comedy called Hail Caesar. He played the character Jerry, alongside Hall himself and Samuel L. Jackson. Robert's father also appeared in this movie as an unnamed butler. Next, Robert appeared in the satirical black comedy crime film Natural Born Killers, released in August of 1994. It was based on an original screenplay by Quentin Tarantino, but revised by Oliver Stone and Associates. Robert Jr. starred as Wayne Gale, a self-serving tabloid journalist who follows Mickey, played by Woody Harrelson, and Mallory, played by Juliette Lewis, on his show American Maniacs. Mickey and Mallory are 2 lovers who are both the product of horrifying childhoods that as adults have become cold-blooded killers. Not only was it a box office success, it was highly praised for the cast's performances, the comedy, the story, and the fragile combination of carnage and romance. However, the film became notorious for inspiring copycat crimes, including the shooting of William Savage and Patsy Byers, the Heath High School shooting, and most infamous, the Columbine High School massacre in 1999. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold murdered 12 students and 1 teacher at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. The massacre ended with both ending their own lives. During one of the basement tapes found in Harris and Klebold's homes, the perpetrators mention how Hollywood will want to adapt their life story, and they debate on whether or not Steven Spielberg or Quentin Tarantino, who had conceived the story for Natural Born Killers, are appropriate choices to direct the proposed film. There are more, but I won't get into all of them. I will, however, as always, provide links in the description. Only You was a romantic comedy released in October of 1994. Once again co-starring alongside Marissa Tomei, Robert was cast as Peter Wright, the destined lover of Faith, played by Marissa. This is where a short-lived backstage romance ignited between the two. While Robert was still married to Deborah, they ended this affair amicably and remained friends, which allowed Marissa to be given the role of Aunt May in the new Spider-Man movie due to Robert's influence in Hollywood. By 1995, he was a frequent user of cocaine and ecstasy, along with the use of alcohol, and during this year he tried heroin for the first time. There is a rumor that he was introduced to it by another A-list actor, of whom has never been formally named. At one point, he was allegedly caught speeding in his Porsche. He was said to be naked and appeared to be hallucinating when he began throwing imaginary rats at officers. His sister Allison made a statement regarding his struggle. Because Robert's never known what it means to be happy, it's not such a sore spot with him. He has no frame of reference. He's done the best that he can, and he recognizes that something is missing, but he can't necessarily put his finger on it. I think that it's also the pain that he's in, and it's been with him for a long time. I don't think he uses drugs so much to feel anything as to not feel anything, to block out all the emotions, just so he can function. He began being referred to as a lovable tornado, because he was bouncing from rehab to film set to drug binge to back home again. Most of his performances at the time were cited as great disappointments. These movies included Richard III, Home for the Holidays, directed by Jodie Foster, Restoration with Hugh Grant and Meg Ryan, as well as Mr. Willoughby's Christmas Tree, a television special. By 1996, Robert's substance abuse had escalated and became regularly combined with heroin. In April, Deb left him and took Indio. Shortly after this happened, Sean Penn became concerned about his friend and arranged a kind of intervention and kidnapped the star and took him to Sierra Tucson for recovery. Robert went along with it for the first couple of days, but left the center just 3 days later with nothing but a water bottle. He hitchhiked his way back to Malibu and later lost his home. He began couch surfing. He finally got his own apartment, but kept losing the key and disturbing the landlord in the wee hours, so he was eventually asked to move out. On June 23, 1996, he had his first official brush with the law. He had been arrested after being pulled over for speeding, and his charges included drug use, driving under the influence, possession of a concealed weapon, and possession of illegal substances. The police found an unloaded .357 Magnum, as well as heroin and cocaine. He was released after posting bail and was allowed to return home and await his trial. Shortly after, on July 16th, while still on parole, he broke into and entered his neighbor's home. It became referred to as the Goldilocks incident. He swore that his limo driver dropped him off at the wrong house. Homeowners Bill and Lisa Curtis found him in his underwear in their son's bed and couldn't rouse him, so they called the police. Although the homeowners didn't press charges, he was clearly heavily under the influence, and the paramedics needed to give him Narcan to wake him. He was then taken to the Santa Monica Hospital Center for treatment, where he was then transferred to the jail ward of the USC Medical Center. On July 18th, he appeared in court where Judge Lawrence Mira ordered him to attend the detox program at the Exodus Recovery Center in Marina del Rey. He escaped only 2 days later after climbing out of a bathroom window and hitchhiking back to Malibu. He was captured by authorities a few hours later, where he was then held for 9 days. Upon his release on July 29th, Judge Mira ordered Downey to enter a supervised drug rehabilitation. He willingly participated in all of the activities that were provided to him for his recovery. It was evident that Robert had wanted to reach sobriety at this point, but he was just struggling so badly to do so. Robert's personal life at this time was also on a downward spiral. On September 11th of 1996, Robert returned to court and pled no contest to felony drug possession and misdemeanor charges, including possession of a weapon and driving under the influence, relating to the incident back in June. He was dubbed a danger to himself and the community, and Judge Mira ordered he spend 6 months of live-in rehab, where he was obligated to regular drug testing and to attend daily meetings, all the while undergoing outpatient drug counseling. He was also given 3 years probation. A final thought from Judge Mira was, "If you've ever had a chance here to deal with this problem and maintain your sobriety, this is the chance to do it. I wish you good luck. You've made a good start." Robert had previously been on set filming a leading role in the action thriller adventure Danger Zone, which was released in August of 1996. He played alongside Billy Zane as an ex-CIA agent who later becomes the leader of a rebel group. In November of 1996, Robert hosted Saturday Night Live while on leave from rehab, where he talks about his drug use.
Thank you and good evening. Wow, it's great to be back here on Saturday Night Live. I was actually a cast member on the show 10 years ago. And in case you're wondering why I'm hosting, well, actually, I've been invited back as part of their Distinguished Alumni series. Anyway, things are good with me. You know, basically, just been the same old, same old. I did have a really interesting summer, though. In fact, I brought some slides of what I did on my summer vacation. Would you like to see them? Okay, great. Well, it wouldn't be a summer without hosting a barbecue. Yeah. Here's me picking up a little prescription from my pharmacist. And here's me and my personal trainer. That guy works me hard. He really does, but it's worth it when you take off your shirt at the beach, which is where I was going in this next picture. Yeah. You know, you just go with your buddies, carpool lane, it's sweet. And here's me at Disneyland. This next one is of me when I stayed at this terrific guest house in Malibu. It was actually 2 doors down from my own house, but you know. Yeah, anyway, that was kind of nice. Whoa, how did that get in there? That's from Kelsey Grammer's summer vacation. And finally, what would summer be without a hot summer romance? Well, that was my summer. I made some new friends, got to visit a lot of interesting places. We got a great show. Fiona Apple is here. So, stick around. We'll be right back.
Robert was awarded another furlough for positive results from rehab again in December, at which time he granted Diane Sawyer an exclusive interview where he spoke of his family, career, and substance abuse. Released mid-1997, Robert had starred alongside Heather Graham as Blake Allen and Natasha Gregson Wagner as Lou, at the center of a love triangle in Two Girls and a Guy, again written and directed by James Toback. Toback had previously approached Robert in November of 1996 at the after-party he attended with his mother after he had finished taping SNL, to offer Robert the role. Toback had seen Robert Jr. on the news and wanted to try and give him a leg up to kickstart his career once again. Producers had to pay an additional $30,000 to insure Downey for the film, as well as submit mandatory drug tests at the end of each day to keep his counselors happy. Heather Graham had fallen in love with Downey while on set, and later told him she was upset that he never asked her out. In September of 1997, Robert relapsed and disappeared on a 4-day bender, resulting in a failed drug test, which was reported to Judge Mira. Since his probation requirements had changed, he was allowed time to complete the film he was working on, called In Dreams, but due back in court in December. One Night Stand was released in November of 1997, starring Wesley Snipes as Max. Robert played the friend of Max, who is dying of AIDS. Director Mike Figgis later admitted that on the first day of filming, Downey not only showed up 2 hours late, but barefooted and carrying a man purse with a gun stuffed into it. He was originally cast as the main character, Max, but at that point he was down to 138 pounds and already looking very sickly, so he was more suited as the friend with AIDS. Released in December of 1997, Robert had a supporting role thrown his way by friend Sean Penn, where he played the customer of the pool cleaning company in the romantic comedy Hugo Pool, starring Patrick Dempsey, Richard Lewis, Alyssa Milano, and Malcolm McDowell. Robert returned to court in December regarding the violation of his probation, with his lawyer, John Stewart Holden. During the proceedings, Downey professed, "I've been addicted to drugs in one form or another since I was 8 years old. I have no excuses. I find myself defenseless." Judge Mira scolded Robert, going on to say, "I'm running out of ways to rehabilitate you. I'm going to incarcerate you, and I'm going to incarcerate you in a way that is very unpleasant to you. I'm willing to send you to a state prison. I don't care who you are." He was sent to the Twin Towers Correctional Facility in downtown LA, where he served 111 days in total. He was also court-ordered for yet another stay at rehab afterwards. While in county jail, Robert found himself in a number of fights. He had reportedly awoken in a pool of his own blood twice. He was a target because of his celebrity status, and after 2 months, and finally receiving a severe gash on his nose after being attacked by 3 inmates, he was moved to solitary confinement. In January of 1998, the legal thriller The Gingerbread Man was released, which Downey had worked on prior to his time in prison. It was based on a discarded John Grisham manuscript and was a complete failure. After Robert's release in March of 1998, he directly entered into his 60-day rehab program. Also in March, the action crime thriller U.S. Marshals was released. Robert starred alongside Tommy Lee Jones and again Wesley Snipes. It was a spin-off of the 1993 movie with Harrison Ford called The Fugitive. Downey was cast as Special Agent John Royce, pursuing fugitive Mark Sheridan, played by Snipes, amidst an international conspiracy scandal. Although the film had mixed reviews, it was a great commercial success, a first for Robert in quite some time. He completed his rehab program and was back out in the world, presumably clean and dry. He was turning his life around, and in August, his wife Deborah Falconer even joined him for a film premiere. A fuse was still lit within his life, however, because by this point he was going completely broke. Between his lavish cocaine and stripper parties and his enormous legal and rehab bills, his sobriety was soon to be tested. January 1999, In Dreams was released, a psychological horror in which Robert played the part of a deranged serial killer. This film was another failure and was criticized for its lack of narrative cohesiveness. It appeared that Robert's personal life was being reflected on screen, and bouncing between court, jail, and rehab was taking its toll on the star's acting capabilities. Released in April of 1999, Robert played Hans, a ski instructor in the romantic drama Friends and Lovers, which followed a group of 20-somethings on a ski trip. Mid-1999, Downey appeared in 2 TV films, Black and White, alongside Jared Leto, Claudia Schiffer, Brooke Shields, Ben Stiller, Mike Tyson, and Elijah Wood, and God, the Devil, and Bob. On August 6, 1999, Robert appeared once again before Judge Mira to face his previous parole violation in relation to the break-in after his first arrest. This time he was represented by Robert Shapiro and his team, the firm who defended O.J. Simpson. Although Shapiro delivered a compelling plea, noting Robert Jr.'s upbringing and his recent efforts in sobriety, Judge Mira had run out of any alternatives. Robert Jr. seemed to have accepted the inevitable when he stated, "It's like I've got a shotgun in my mouth, and my finger's on the trigger, and I like the taste of gunmetal." He clearly needed even more attentive and intense treatment than what he'd been given so far. He was sentenced to 3 years in Corcoran State Prison while attending a supervised rehab program across the street. He performed light kitchen duties and faced all the same harassment and abuse as he had in county jail. Corcoran was also well known for its gang violence and having inmates pitted against each other by the guards during the 90s. Corcoran has housed some of the highest profile convicts, including Charles Manson and Philip Garrido. Robert co-starred in the comedy film Bowfinger, written by and starring Steve Martin, released mid-August of 1999, about a man who plans to direct a movie on a mere $2,000 budget. Robert was cast as Jerry Renfro, a movie executive who promises to distribute the film so long as it includes actor Kit Ramsey, a pompous and eccentric actor played by Eddie Murphy. It was a great success at the box office and had mostly favorable reviews.
Awesome.
You're doing great.
After his release from prison, due to a successful appeal in August of 1999, Robert checked himself into Walden House, a drug treatment facility he had previously attended. Released in February of 2000, Robert starred in the comedy drama Wonder Boys as Terry Crabtree, a homosexual book editor. The movie was an overall financial disappointment. Robert Jr. had presumably gotten sober and had began working on the popular TV show Ally McBeal as Larry Paul, the main character's love interest. He appeared in 21 episodes and also provided vocals for 2 soundtrack albums. A Very Ally Christmas with Vonda Shepard, where he sang White Christmas and River, and the soundtrack Ally McBeal for Once in My Life, most notably for Every Breath You Take, featuring Vonda Shepard and Sting. In some ways, his life was looking up, but in other areas, the stress was still mounting. His financial troubles of over $1 million in tax liens from the IRS put more strain on his and Deborah's already failing relationship, largely due to his drug use and infidelities, but Deborah was running out of patience for the fallout. He was lonely and depressed after being unable to spend the Thanksgiving weekend with Deborah in India, which of course resulted in a relapse. He started his holiday at a showgirls club in Cathedral City, LA, where he made a few friends. They headed back to one of their apartments, and this is when one of the girls offered Robert a line, and soon enough they were all headed towards his hotel, grabbing an ounce of cocaine on the way. An anonymous tipster had called in and said, "There's a man with an ounce of cocaine and a couple of guns, and he's really upset."
911 emergency?
Yeah, I'd just like to let you know that in room 311 of the Mercury Resort, there's a man that has an ounce of cocaine and a couple of guns, and he's pretty upset. Thank you.
After the phone call took place, police raided room 311 of the Merv Griffin Resort in Palm Springs, California, on November 25, 2000. Although they didn't find any guns, they found 4 grams of cocaine and 16 Valium. He tested positive for both drugs and was taken into custody. Downey posted a $15,000 bail the next morning, but he was far from being out of troubled water. Robert was then awaiting a plea proposal from prosecutors. As a repeat offender, he could have been given a sentence of up to 4 years. He was sent to see a psychiatrist and began taking 2 types of medication for his depression. He was again required to submit to weekly urine samples and attend NA meetings. His attorneys were also able to postpone the court hearing by appealing that the search of his hotel room was unconstitutional and therefore the evidence of drugs was invalid. Robert's friend Tom Sizemore confessed that not only had he needed help from his friends to pay his attorney fees, but that Robert had basically relapsed the moment he was released. He was getting high day one, he said to the Chicago Sun-Times. "It's very sad," he added, "but it's tough to be in the Hollywood world. People just give drugs to you if you're an actor. If Robert goes into a nightclub, he's doomed. Someone will give him drugs." Tom Sizemore himself had a substance abuse problem, among others. In 2003, Sizemore was accused of molesting an 11-year-old actress on the set of Natural Born Killers. Prosecution chose not to go ahead with the case due to the lack of witnesses or evidence. A statement from Sizemore's publicist again denied the abuse, noting that nothing amiss was reported by Natural Born Killers staff member whose duty was supervising child actors on set. To further add to Downey's troubles at the time, producers Terrence Michael and Richard Finney were suing him and his father for breach of contract after commissioning the father-son duo to write a script for $250,000. What the producers got instead was a series of unrelated shorts involving themes of anger and paranoia, according to Michael. The movie was titled The Very Special, but it just seemed to be a special kind of drug-fueled nonsense. They chose to settle outside of court. On April 24, 2001, Robert was arrested yet again in Culver City, LA, after being picked up by Officer Yvette County, who found him barefooted in an alleyway, showing signs of being under the influence of narcotics, based on his rapid and incessant rambling. On 12823 Washington Boulevard, room 116, they found Robert's friend Alan Alexo, who had barricaded himself in, and showed similar signs of intoxication. The two were brought in, and because Alexo had a warrant out for his arrest, he was collected by his parole agents, and Robert was given a drug test. Luckily, because he was only under the influence, and not in possession of any substances, they again ordered him to enter rehab. Laws had changed in California, and repeat substance abuse offenders were more likely to receive treatment rather than incarceration for drug and alcohol abuse-related crimes. However, this incident would likely be reviewed, combined with his previous charges, during the court proceedings regarding the Merv Griffin Resort incident, which were still being delayed until July. After his most recent arrest, Robert was fired and written out of the last few episodes of the season of Ally McBeal. On July 16, 2001, he pleaded no contest to the charges laid after the Thanksgiving arrest, and because the new laws had already come into effect, he was sentenced to 1 year at a residential rehab called Wavelengths, and another 3 years probation. Judge White added, This is not a gift of the court. This is going to be hard work. It can provide a tremendous benefit to you and to the public as well. But you're going to have to work at it. Robert was also subject to random drug screen testing and ordered to pay a fine. He was then warned that if he violated his probation even once, he would not pass go, he would not collect $200, he would go directly to jail and serve the maximum 4-year sentence. The domino effect of his latest run-in with the law was a trying time for Robert. His already very fragile relationship with wife Deborah hit its breaking point. And in 2001, Deb took Indio and filed for divorce. His plans to star in Mel Gibson's play of Shakespeare's Hamlet on the LA stage was cancelled by Mel due to Robert's ongoing issues. Although he'd been cut from the Ally McBeal show, he still managed to pull out a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor in a Series, as well as a Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Performance by a Male in a Comedy Series. He had also sparked a brief romance with Ally McBeal herself, Callista Flockhart. The two were seen together at the Golden Globes, but the rumors of them being seriously involved faded when he began dating former fashion publicist Christy Bauer Jordan. After successfully completing the year-long rehab program at Wavelengths, Robert Jr. was released in July of 2002. He chose to spend roughly 9 hours a week at Wavelengths voluntarily, taking part in outpatient programs. He had also embraced NA and had quotes and other NA-related items set up around his room. He warmed back up to working after appearing in 2 short films, Lethargy and Whatever We Do. And after moving in with friend Mel Gibson, Mel approached Robert with a screenplay and tapes for a musical crime comedy, The Singing Detective. Mel also agreed to pay for the expensive insurance bond required to allow Robert to work again. Gibson co-produced as well as starred in the film. Robert co-starred as Dan Dark alongside Katie Holmes, who played Nurse Mills. The film is a variety of stories as told by Dan Dark from a hospital bed, where he's suffering from psoriasis and crippling arthritis. Unfortunately, the film was very poorly received and was a catastrophic commercial failure. He also appeared in the music video for Elton John's I Want Love, which was filmed in one long continuous take at the Greystone Manor in Beverly Hills. Director Sam Taylor Johnson and Robert enjoyed working together so much on the music video that they again got together to do an art video called Pietà, made in the manner of Michelangelo's famous Pietà sculpture in Rome. The piece was captured in real time, and the more you look at it, the more in-depth it feels. Released in November 2003, Robert starred in the supernatural psychological thriller Gothika. He was cast as Dr. Pete Graham, who is a colleague of Dr. Miranda Gray, played by Halle Berry. Dr. Graham treats Miranda when she's entered into the facility as a patient after being accused of murdering her husband. The critics were harsh and negative. However, the film grossed nearly $150 million worldwide. This was a sure sign that Downey was more than capable of delivering a great performance, without the crutch of drugs and alcohol, albeit with some help from co-producer Joel Silver, who agreed to hold back 40% of his salary to avoid his addictive behavior while on set. During the preparation for Gothika, Robert was introduced to Susan Levin, a producer on the film. At first she ignored his advances, in an effort to stay professional, and witnessing his efforts and lengths that he was going through in order to stay clean, she started warming up to him. However, a relationship quickly flourished after production was completed. I did meet Darth Vader for like a minute, Susan acknowledges, right after the movie wrapped, and I said immediately, this isn't gonna work, and I made it clear that to stay with me, nothing could happen. Only a few short months after they began seeing each other, Robert proposed to Susan the night of her 30th birthday. She responded yes, but under the condition that he stay sober for another 2 years and every day thereafter. He was also not yet divorced from estranged wife Deborah. Their divorce was finalized with a petition in a Los Angeles court on April 26, 2004. As another form of therapy, Robert explored music after having demonstrated it improved his singing abilities in a number of movies. In November of 2004, Robert released his debut studio album, The Futurist, through Sony Classical, with 8 songs that he wrote and provided vocals for. He and his son Indio arranged the track list and designed the album art together. As a tribute to his love for his fiancée and son, Robert tattooed Susie Q on his left shoulder, and on his right shoulder he tattooed his son's name, Indio, surrounded by some type of picture frame and a blue head that seems to be watching over it. After playing a small part in the anthology film Eros, in the Equilibrium segment of Nick Penrose, exploring the reasons why his stress is manifesting in a reoccurring erotic dream. He was cast in the drama film Game 6. Robert co-starred alongside Michael Keaton and Catherine O'Hara. The film followed a playwright whose opening number is set to be the same day of the 1986 World Series. It was given a limited release after being presented at the Sundance Film Festival January 2005. His next Hollywood film was a starring role in the neo-noir black comedy crime film written and directed by Shane Black called Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, released October 2005. It was based on the novel by Brett Halliday, Bodies and Where You Find Them. Again produced by Joel Silver and Susan Levin, Robert starred as Harry Lockhart, who is retelling recent events at a Los Angeles party, involving a botched robbery, dead bodies, car accidents, and more. The film also starred Val Kilmer and Robert's son Indio as Harry, aged 9.
I call my trick the Jaws of Death. Ow!
Going to be an actress.
The film only just barely earned back its budget, but received a very high approval rating from critics. Downey was disappointed with the low box office earnings, but said that Kiss Kiss Bang Bang ended up being his calling card to Iron Man, as it was his performance in this film that attracted director Jon Favreau. In the documentary released in April of 2005, The Outsider, Robert Jr. made his contribution to interviews and commentary.
I mean, he's a genius and he's a retard.
Along with Woody Allen, Neve Campbell, Barry Levinson, and James Toback himself, exploring the shooting, editing, and marketing of Toback's 2004 film, When Will I Be Loved? The film had a 35-page script and was mostly improvised throughout his 12-day shoot. Just over a decade later, and likely motivated by the MeToo movement, the Los Angeles Times, BBC, as well as other major news outlets, reported that 38 women had accused James Toback of sexual harassment and/or assault. When contacted by the Times, Toback denied the allegations, saying that he'd never met any of these women, or if he did, it was for 5 minutes and has no recollection. LA Times writer Glenn Whipp, who broke the story originally, later tweeted that since the story was published, the number of women with accusations regarding Toback had doubled. Celebrity accusers included actresses Rachel McAdams, Selma Blair, Terry Conn, Katerina Scorzone, and Julianne Moore. By January 2018, Whipp had received claims from 395 women. Unfortunately, LA County prosecutors declared that they would not be pressing any charges against Toback, as almost all of the 38 accusers were beyond the statute of limitations, and the remainder failed to show up to be interviewed. That's not suspicious at all. At one point, Toback would claim to have invented Robert Jr. I hate to say something like this, but my hatred is not strong enough to stop me from saying it. I discovered and invented him. He was a reject when I met him, a junkie reject, and I found something appealing in him, kind of cute and unassuming and devious and perverse, and I gave him the lead in The Pickup Artist, which was a huge film. Meanwhile, Robert was born into film, and had already worked with Joel Silvers before Toback. It was Joel and Susan Levins that truly helped him, first to become sober, and then to become successful. Toback didn't care that he was high, only that he could perform. In the grand scheme of things, having the lead role in The Pickup Artist was nothing compared to working with John Hughes in Weird Science prior to, as a supporting role. John Hughes would later become known for the National Lampoon series, The Breakfast Club, the Beethoven series, the Home Alone series, and many more memorable films. Pickup Artist is not exactly widely recognized, and it suffered a $2 million loss of its initial budget. In August of 2005, Susan Levin and Robert Jr. were wed in a Jewish ceremony at Amagansett, New York, with musical performances by Sting and Billy Joel. Released in October 2005, Robert co-starred in the historical drama written and directed by George Clooney called Good Night, Good Luck. Clooney also with a starring role, joined by Jeff Daniels and David Stratham. The film portrays the conflict between veteran radio host and a television journalist set in 1953. It did moderately well at the box office and was nominated for 6 Academy Awards. Robert narrated the documentary Hubert Selby Jr. It'll Be Better Tomorrow, released mid-2005, about the American writer known for his novel and film Requiem for a Dream. The film featured interviews with Selby, as well as Lou Reed, Jared Leto, and Darren Aronofsky. In the family comedy The Shaky Dog, released March 2006, produced by Tim Allen, Robert was cast as Dr. Kozak. The film is about Dave Douglas, played by Tim Allen, who was transformed into a sheepdog after getting bit. It received mainly negative reviews, but grossed almost $90 million worldwide. Mid-2006, Downey had a guest appearance on the show Family Guy after contacting production staff and asking if he could assist in an episode, as his son Indio was a fan of the show. He was cast as the mentally deranged brother of Lois in the episode called The Fat Guy Strangler. A Scanner Darkly was an adult animated sci-fi thriller released May 2006, based on a novel of the same name by Philip K. Dick about a dystopian society plagued with addiction. Featuring the animated portrayal and voices of Robert Jr., Keanu Reeves, Woody Harrelson, and Winona Ryder. The film received mainly negative reviews and did very poorly at the box office. However, it's been embraced as an underground cult classic. In the drama A Guide to Recognizing Your Saints, released September 2006, was adapted from the memoir of the same name by author, director, and musician Dito Montiel. Robert received a leading role. It follows Montiel's childhood in Astoria, New York during the 1980s. Downey was also a co-producer, along with longtime friend Sting. It was a straight-to-video release. Released in November of 2006, Robert starred in the Diane Arbus biography called Fur as Lionel Sweeney, alongside Nicole Kidman as Arbus. Between 2007 to 2008, Downey appeared in The Zodiac, based on the true crime case of the Zodiac Killer, Lucky You, about a professional poker player in Las Vegas. He also appeared in the comedy drama Charlie Bartlett, about a teen who provides therapy and prescription drugs to other students. Up until this point, and although he had participated in over 60 films, Robert Jr. had yet to have any sort of big-budget blockbuster hit. That was until he was cast in the lead role of Iron Man, released in April of 2008 as Tony Stark. The film focuses on Stark, an industrialist and master engineer who inherits his father's company, Stark Industries. He builds a powered exoskeleton after a life-threatening accident, where he then becomes Iron Man. Co-starring Jeff Bridges as Obadiah Stane, Terrence Howard as James Rhodes, and Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts. Director Jon Favreau appears in the film as Happy Hogan, Stark's bodyguard and chauffeur. Robert had to wear lifts to enhance his height and had to gain 20 pounds of muscle in 5 months to look strong enough for the role. This was a small price to pay, as the movie received great praise, with Robert earning a Saturn Award for Best Actor, and the film grossing almost $600 million worldwide. This was Downey's big break. When Downey traveled to Japan for the opening of Iron Man, he was detained on entry because Japanese authorities ran his passport and became aware of his checkered criminal past.
Please, small problem with your passport. Links up to some incredible criminal. I'm like, yeah, but I'm told that, well, you did not make a claim of said activity. I was like, oh, look, I retired, my assistant. All right, we would like to interrogate you. I was like, interrogate? Fuck. Great.
For failing to disclose these convictions, Downey was interrogated for 6 hours and was almost barred from entry into Japan. It was finally decided that he could enter for the Iron Man premiere, but he was never allowed into Japan again. Robert made a cameo as Tony Stark / Iron Man in The Incredible Hulk, released in June of 2008, starring Edward Norton as the Hulk, as well as Liv Tyler. The film was not nearly as commercially successful as Iron Man, but it still grossed almost $275 million worldwide. Norton had reportedly provided rewrites of the script every day of filming. Director Louis Leterrier welcomed the changes, saying that Edward's script has given Bruce's story real gravitas. However, screenwriter Zach Penn was far less welcoming, and was displeased with Norton's contributions. During 2008, Robert was honored by Time magazine's Time 100, an annual list of the 100 most influential people in the world. His laurels include 2 Academy Award nominations, 3 Golden Globe Awards, numerous other award nominations and wins, and popular and commercial success. Robert Jr. was then cast under the direction of Ben Stiller in an action comedy film written by Justin Theroux and Stiller called Tropic Thunder, released August 2008. It follows a group of actors making a Vietnam War film that are accidentally on purpose dropped into the middle of the jungle where they suddenly face real danger. Robert was praised for his performance with 3 awards nominations. The film was also a moderate success, grossing nearly $200 million worldwide. Following his personal life, while Robert seemed to be thriving, his son Indio would begin following in the Downey men's footsteps. After he was admitted to rehab for drug addiction in 2008, Robert had obvious guilt and regret watching his son go down this path and stayed a main support in his life. In April of 2009, Robert appeared in the British drama film The Soloist as Steve Lopez alongside Jamie Foxx. Based on the true story of Nathaniel Ayers, played by Foxx, a musician who attended Juilliard, who had developed schizophrenia and became homeless. The story was first publicized by a journalist for the LA Times named Steve Lopez, who had taken notice to Ayers playing violin, and stopped and asked him where he'd learned to play. Critical and commercial recognition for this role was quickly overshadowed by his lead role in Sherlock Holmes, released December of 2009. Joined by Jude Law and Rachel McAdams, and again produced by Joel Silvers and Susan Downey. Robert won a Golden Globe for Best Actor in Musical or Comedy, and the film grossed nearly $525 million worldwide. Soon after, Susan became co-president of Dark Castles Entertainment and executive VP of production for Silver Pictures, Joel Silver's production company. Iron Man 2 was released in April 2010, and again Robert was cast as Tony Stark / Iron Man, this time with the screenplay written by Justin Theroux. The film takes place 6 months after the events in Iron Man 1, and Tony Stark refuses to hand over the Iron Man technology to the United States government. Meanwhile, Russian scientist Ivan Vanko, played by Mickey Rourke, has developed a similar technology that he intends to use to pursue a vendetta he has against the Stark family. The film also formally introduced Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., played by Samuel L. Jackson. The part of James Rhodes was taken over by Don Cheadle. Iron Man 2 exceeded box office earnings compared to Iron Man 1, grossing almost $625 million worldwide. A small feud erupted between Terrence Howard and Robert, when Howard was cut from the Iron Man series as James Rhodes. The choice, however, was beyond Downey's control, as Jon Favreau had alleged that Terrence had exhibited difficult behavior on set. Favreau goes on to say he was ultimately unhappy with Howard's performance and spent a lot of time cutting and reshooting his scenes. Apparently nobody told Howard about his behavioral problems, and he had tried contacting Downey for months after this decision was made, to which Robert seemed to be avoiding him. I had nothing to do with that decision. I love Terrence very, very much. That's all I'll say, because I haven't talked to him yet. It's one of those situations where I still don't quite know what happened or why. Here's what happens too. Things happen, and you wind up commenting on them before you've actually talked to the people, and it's in poor taste. Terrence had a history of anger and violence, with reports later coming out in February 2009 that Howard had been arrested in 2001 for a variety of charges relating to a violent attack on his first wife, including simple assault, terrorist threats, harassment, and stalking. He had also been arrested in August of 2000 after causing a disturbance on an airplane. He had allegedly assaulted a flight attendant after refusing her request to return to his seat while the seatbelt light was on. This media revelation likely contributed to the decision to replace him. June of 2010, Robert and Susan started their own production company, Team Downey, under Warner Bros. In November of 2010, Robert Jr. co-starred with Zach Galifianakis and was joined by Juliette Lewis and Jamie Foxx in the comedy Due Date. Robert played Peter Hyman, and Zach played Ethan Tremblay, two unlikely friends who under ridiculous circumstances are forced to embark on their respective journeys together. Although it received mixed reviews, it grossed over $200 million worldwide. Also in November of 2010, Downey appeared in a straight-to-video romance called Love and Distrust, alongside Robert Pattinson and James Franco. October 2011, Robert attended close friend Sting's 60th birthday celebration at the Beacon Theater in New York City, which is also to be a benefit concert for the Robin Hood Foundation. During the concert, Robert and Sting got on stage to sing Driven to Tears. This performance was an awesome testimony to Robert's singing talents as he crushed the performance.
When nothing seems to get through, what should become of our world? Who knows what to do? Driven to tears, driven to tears, driven to tears, driven to tears.
Produced once again by Joel Silver and Susan Downey, in the follow-up to Sherlock Holmes, Robert reprised his leading role as Sherlock in A Game of Shadows, released in December of 2011. Joined once again by Jude Law and Rachel McAdams, it was another smash hit in the series, grossing nearly $550 million worldwide. During his award speech at the 25th American Cinematique Award ceremony in 2011, Downey asked Hollywood to forgive Mel Gibson, who was accused of being an anti-Semite for his portrayal of the Jewish people, and then after blaming the Jewish community for the backlash he received for the film The Passion of the Christ, in which Gibson had written and directed.
He said that if I hugged the cactus long enough, I'd become a man of some humility, and that my life would take on a new meaning. And I did, and it worked. All he asked in return was that someday I help the next guy in some small way. It's reasonable to assume that at the time he didn't imagine the next guy would be him. Or that someday was tonight. So anyway, on this special occasion, and in light of the recent holidays, including Columbus Day, I humbly ask that you join me, unless you are completely without sin, in which case you picked the wrong industry, in forgiving my friend his trespasses, offering him the same clean slate you have me, and allowing him to continue his great and ongoing contribution to our collective art without shame. He's hugged the cactus long enough.
Susan and Robert had their first child together, Robert's second son, Exton Elias, born on February 7th, 2012. In March of 2012, the online news source Jezebel broke a story claiming that Robert Jr. was behind an anonymous account revealing what are called blind items, where for legal purposes, they never reveal exactly who or what they are talking about, but deep-diving internet sleuths are generally able to triangulate and reveal who the poster is talking about and who the poster themselves may be. He went under the username Haim, and after stories began to circulate and speculate that Downey was behind the account went dead. The biggest reveal, by what was accepted to be Downey, was of a secret call girl ring alleged to include child stars like Hayden Panettiere, who he worked with on the show of Ally McBeal as the main character's daughter, and Amanda Bynes, a Nickelodeon regular. Nickelodeon has come to be quite well known for their minor attracted executives, including Dan Schneider and Brian Peck. Schneider was the creator of The Amanda Show, in which Bynes was the star of.
Yes, I'm the executive producer and the head writer.
You actually wrote the words we're saying to each other right now.
Yes, I wrote this whole conversation that we're having right now.
Since you're an executive
Give me
producer.
an IC. Give me an IC before since you're the executive producer.
The blind item goes on to expose Hayden's physically and sexually abusive childhood, and how her mother allowed certain abuse to happen to her for fear of her own safety. He also revealed in great detail an incident in which Kirk Douglas had violently assaulted Natalie Wood when she was only 16 years old. At this point of the post, he basically reveals himself. November 28th, 1981, Natalie suffered a suspicious and abrupt end to her life at the age of 43. Wood had allegedly drowned after falling over the side of a yacht, with her death ruled as a drowning, hypothermia, and undetermined factors. Although the circumstances of her death were never fully established, the autopsy report stated that Wood had bruises on her body and arms, as well as an abrasion on her left cheek. Along with her at the time of her death was her husband Robert Wagner, a co-star Christopher Walken, and the boat's captain Dennis DeVerne. In a quote to People magazine about Wood's death in 1986, "I don't know what happened," Walken said coldly. "She slipped and fell in the water. I was in bed then. It was a terrible thing. Look, we're in a conversation I won't have." It's obviously a lot harder now for these things to take place to begin with. What with the internet, camera phones, etc., as well as the openness and willingness to divulge negative personal events publicly and independent of mainstream media. What with the MeToo movement and many bigwigs getting cut down at the knees, having their entire character called into question. This movement did shed some light on some of the more heinous tendencies of elites in the industry. It contributed to the arrest of Harvey Weinstein, after 12 high-profile women stepped forward with accusations of sexual assault and harassment. Among those included Robert Jr.'s longtime friend, Gwyneth Paltrow, who would detail an occasion in 1995 in which Harvey had made advances on her in a hotel room. Other actresses who alleged inappropriate behavior by Harvey were Salma Hayek, Rose McGowan, Ashley Judd, Angelina Jolie, Uma Thurman, Heather Graham, and many more. Robert was more than happy to play Iron Man once again in Marvel's The Avengers, which was released in April of 2012. The spy agency S.H.I.E.L.D. recruits Iron Man, played by Robert, Captain America, played by Chris Evans, the Hulk, with Norton replaced by Mark Ruffalo, Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson, and Hawkeye, played by Jeremy Renner. They joined together as a team to stop Thor's brother Loki, played by Tom Hiddleston, from subjugating Earth. The film made waves as being the third highest grossing film of all time, earning over $1.5 billion worldwide. It's the first Marvel film to generate over $1 billion in ticket sales. Robert went on to win many awards for Iron Man 3. He won the Kids' Choice Award for Favorite Male Butt Kicker, a Saturn Award for Best Actor, as well as both the Teen Choice Award and People's Choice Award for Favorite Action Movie Star. Seemingly for shits and gigs, Robert Jr. and Scarlett Johansson starred in a comedy drama entitled Chef, written, directed, and starring Jon Favreau. Favreau plays a celebrity chef that after a public confrontation with a food critic, decides to run a food truck. It was well received by critics, but wasn't very successful at the box office. Again, Robert's son Indio makes headlines on June 29, 2014, now at the age of 20. Indio was arrested for possession of a controlled substance and paraphernalia. He and his friends were pulled over after a passenger was seen smoking from a pipe. Indio was searched, where they found cocaine on his person. He was later released on a $10,000 bond. Robert said in a statement to Us Weekly, "Unfortunately, there's a genetic component to addiction, and Indio has likely inherited it. There's a lot of family support and understanding, and we're all determined to rally behind him and help him become the man he's capable of being. We're grateful to the Sheriff's Department for their intervention and believe Indio can be another recovery success story instead of a cautionary tale." Indio's case was later dismissed after he completed an 18-month program. He then shifted his focus back to his music career, with a band he formed with his friend Ralph Alexander called The Dose. On September 22, 2014, Robert Jr.'s mother Elsie Ann passed away at the age of 80. This surely tested Robert's strength and willingness to maintain his sobriety. Downey shared this statement, She was my role model as an actor and as a woman who got sober and stayed that way. She was also reclusive, self-deprecating, a stoic Scotch-German rural Pennsylvanian, a ball-buster, stubborn, and happy to hold a grudge. My ambition, tenacity, loyalty, moods, grandiosity, occasional passive aggression, and my faith. That's all her, and I wouldn't have it any other way. In October of 2014, Robert and Susan's company Team Downey made its production debut with the legal drama The Judge, directed by David Dobkin and produced by Robert and Susan as a pair. The film follows Hank Palmer, an attorney, played by Downey, who struggles with the dysfunction of his family under his father Joseph Palmer, played by Robert Duvall, who is a criminal court judge. The film received mixed reviews, but was able to double its $45 million budget. Robert Jr. and wife Susan welcomed their daughter, Avery Roel, into the world on November 4th, 2014. Robert posted on his personal Facebook, "After 9 months of intensive development, Team Downey is pleased to announce our 2014 fall/winter project. Principal photography commenced 11/14 and will continue until she says, 'Dad, you are embarrassing me. I'm 30. This has got to stop.'" He continued by saying, "She's 7 pounds even, spans 20 inches, and is accompanied by a variety of Susan's traits that have seemingly overwritten my junk DNA." To go with the exciting news of his newborn daughter, Downey topped the Forbes list of Hollywood's highest paid actors, making an estimated $80 million in earnings between June 2014 and June 2015. Robert was joined by an ensemble cast for Marvel's Avengers: Age of Ultron, written and directed by Joss Whedon and released in April 2015. The Avengers joined together to fight Ultron, an artificial intelligence determined to cause human extinction. It was the second most expensive film ever made, costing over $350 million. The critics and viewers alike were more than satisfied, and the film grossed $1.4 billion.
Okay.
Never one to shrink from an honest challenge.
Get after it.
It's physics.
Physics.
All right, so if I lift it, I then rule Asgard?
Yes, of course.
I will be reinstituting prima nocta. Be right back.
During the promotion for Age of Ultron, Robert walked out of an interview with Krishnan Guru Murthy when pressed about his dark past.
I mean, you say we're promoting an interview, promoting the movie. I mean, obviously you're doing a promotional round of interviews, and that's why we're talking about the movie. But we also would like to talk a little bit about you, and I don't know how comfortable you are, you know, talking about yourself at the moment.
You have as much time as anyone else will.
Yeah, well, okay, well then let me just ask you a few more questions, and you can answer them if you want to and not if you don't want to. I mean, well, I think we've got 3 more minutes on our agreement.
Your foot's starting to jump a little bit. You better get to your next question.
You, the reason I'm asking about the past is that you've talked in other interviews again about your relationship with your father and the role of all of that in, you know, the dark periods you entered and taking drugs and drinking and all of that. And I just wondered whether, you know, you think you're free of all of that, or whether that's still something.
I'm sorry, I really don't. What are we doing?
Well, I'm just asking questions. That's all.
Right.
Okay.
Bye.
Robert went on to explain in a later interview with Howard Stern that he felt it was inappropriate, that children would be watching, and that he would leave again if it ever happened in future interviews.
Robert explained his distaste with the entire situation on The Howard Stern Show on SiriusXM on Tuesday, saying, "I'm one of those guys who I'm always assuming the social decorum is in play, and that we're promoting a superhero movie, a lot of kids are going to see it, and that just has nothing to do with your creepy dark agenda." He also said that he hated feeling all of a sudden ashamed and obligated to accommodate your weirdo life. In classic Howard Stern fashion, the two just went into ripping Murthy and other celebrity muckraker journalists like him.
In December of 2015, Robert received a complete and unconditional pardon from the governor of California, Jerry Brown, for his prior drug convictions, due to the fact that he has lived an honest and upright life, exhibited good moral character, and conducted himself as a law-abiding citizen in the years since his last arrest. In 2016, Downey took part in a voting ad with other A-list celebrities encouraging people to register and vote in the election. Audiences perceived an underlying message of being anti-Trump. In May of 2016, Marvel followed up its major success of the Avengers with Captain America: Civil War, which shows a disagreement over the international oversight of the Avengers, which fractures them into opposing factions, one led by Iron Man, played by Robert Jr., and the other by Captain America, played by Chris Evans. This allowed for a culmination of many of the Marvel movies. The film was both critically and commercially successful, grossing over $1.1 billion worldwide. Spider-Man: Homecoming was released in July of 2017, with Robert Jr. making an appearance as Tony Stark/Iron Man. Sony Pictures chairman Tom Rothman noted that, beyond the commercial advantage of featuring Downey in the film, the inclusion of Stark was important due to the relationship established between him and Parker in Captain America: Civil War. The film grossed nearly $900 million worldwide. The Avengers: Infinity War, released in April 2018, joins both the cast from the Avengers and the cast from the Guardians of the Galaxy in an attempt to stop Thanos, played by Josh Brolin, from collecting the all-powerful Infinity Stones. This installment in the Avengers franchise was the most positively received by critics and the box office thus far, grossing over $2 billion worldwide. It was the very first superhero film and fourth film of all time to earn over $2 billion. To celebrate the release of the new movie, 5 of the original 6 Avengers got matching tattoos, with the exception of Mark Ruffalo. The tattoo artist was Josh Lord. For this film, Robert took home yet another Teen Choice Award for Choice Action Movie Star.
Oh, what an honor. You like Frisbee? Go long. Go long. I gotta tell you, this is such a big deal for me. It's probably the most significant achievement of my career. Without you, I'm nothing. With you, I'm but a small, yet integral part of the cinematic universe known as Marvel. Keep going, buddy.
The Avengers: Endgame premiered April 22nd, 2019, and was fully available theatrically worldwide by April 26th. The film is set just 3 weeks after Thanos used the Infinity Stones to disintegrate half of all life across the universe. And the surviving members of the Avengers and their allies work together to reverse the damage. Endgame utterly crushed opening weekend box office records, earning well over $1 billion, and an enormous amount of praise by critics and fans alike. It seems that the majority are quite pleased with the culmination of the 22-film story. Future films including Robert that are currently in post-production are All-Star Weekend, an independent sports comedy written, produced, and directed by, as well as starring Jamie Foxx, and is to be released sometime in 2019. As well as The Voyage of Dr. Dolittle, set to be released in January 2020, and is to be the second undertaking by Team Downey. The film is based on the novel of the same name, written by Hugh Lofting, as a part 2 in the Dr. Dolittle series, written in the 1920s. Starring Robert Jr. as Dr. John Dolittle, with supporting cast Antonio Banderas, Michael Sheen, and Jim Broadbent, and joining as voice actors John Cena as a polar bear, Selena Gomez as a giraffe, Rami Malek as a gorilla, and many more. Between his predisposition to drugs and having his life path predetermined from birth, Robert Jr. did a mighty good job of finally balancing his life out and finding better ways to cope with his past experiences and emotions. Robert Stork dropped him on an island surrounded by sex, drugs, corruption, abuse, crippling depression, scandal, the whole shebang. He's been exposed to so much dark in Hollywood. It's truly commendable that he made it out the other side alive. Currently, Robert serves on the board of directors alongside Jake Gyllenhaal for the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, which is a support network for formerly incarcerated individuals that also advocates for a criminal justice reform. ARC's mission is to reduce incarceration and improve the outcome of the previously incarcerated. However shady or corrupted some of the people he was fated to work with were, it's clear that once he found his moral compass, he's done his best to follow it. He, for the most part, only made a victim of himself, all the while trying to be a good father, making efforts to bond in healthy ways, rather than the ways in which he and his father, Robert Sr., bonded.